Welcome to Adaptation, the book to movie podcast. Or today, I suppose it's the book to TV podcast because we'll be talking about a television adaptation. But before we dive into all of that, I'm Nate.
And I'm Chris.
And today, what are we talking about, Chris?
Today we are talking about Roots. Let me find the Roots, the Saga of an American Family is the full book title.
And who wrote it?
By Alex Haley. Sorry, that's
yes. Maybe the most important detail in the whole thing.
Well, usually I say that. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, Roots, the Saga of an American Family by Alex Haley.
There it is. There we go. Yes, we're talking about Roots, which was, of course, famously adapted for television in the late 70s. But before we get into the history and the how done it and all of that, how have you been, buddy?
Yeah, wonderful. It's been a massive heat wave out here in New York.
I guess so. I've been hearing about that.
We literally went to the movies on Friday just to be out of our house because we have a window unit on each end of the apartment and they could not keep up. It was 8 p.m. I think it was still like 99 degrees outside. It was just roasting.
So what'd you go see?
Went and saw Backrooms, and boy, was it weird.
That's crazy. You guys texted me afterwards, and I was like, that's the last movie I would have recommended.
Everybody else also had the same thought, go to the theater for AC. This was the only film after Blair got back from work that wasn't sold out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We wanted to go see Obsession.
Yeah, that's a big one right now. That one's really big.
Blair went up to, she went home, went back to Fairfield and hung out with Lex and her family for the 4th, and they watched Obsession Saturday
night. Did?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll have to text her about it and see what she thought.
Yeah. I think she certainly enjoyed it more than Backrooms, but also I think we both enjoyed sweating in the heat of our apartment more than Backrooms. That was a strange movie.
It really is strange. I've listened to several podcasts and read several articles about it now, and I just still feel like I don't really have my arms around. There's some very core parts of that movie that I guess we're just too old to have tapped into. I think it's a very Gen Z, maybe Gen Alpha even, piece of storytelling that I just am not plugged into.
Yeah,
which I think is really fascinating in and of itself. Right?
Well, it seemed like you kind of had to be abreast of the. You don't remember that guy's name, do you? The filmmaker,
Parsons, the director.
Yeah. Because we did come back and immediately watch a few reviews online, like what the heck did we just see? Mm-hmm. And it seemed like if you were current with his body of work, it certainly made more sense. Is that the vibe you got?
Yeah, he made these. This is his first movie ever, but he's made several videos, and several of them are movie length that are sort of set in this backroom worlds or back
the liminal space.
Yeah, exactly.
Set whatever that
liminal
means.
Universe. I know, isn't that kind of funny? Part of me that was like the cynical part of me was like, do you know what liminal means?
It just came up 1 billion times, and I was like, this feels like when you ask someone for the definition of a word and they can't give you a definition without using the word.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so what is liminal space? Well, great question. Let me tell you. Liminal space is when you enter a liminal space. No.
Yeah.
I'm learning nothing here.
Right. Yeah. I think I probably liked the film more than the two of you did, but I still don't feel, like I said, it feels like a film that's not in my canon. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't, I'll probably never watch it again. And not because I disliked it, but it's just not for me. Yeah. What have you been reading lately?
This was crazy timing. It was not deliberate at all. But for book club, I just finished James recently by Percival Everett. Have you heard of that?
The name Percival Everett sounds familiar to me. Why is that?
I want to say maybe a year ago, maybe a little bit more. It was pretty big. He was in the running for the Pulitzer. For it, I believe. It's a take on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but from the perspective of Jim the slave.
Oh, okay. That's kind of fun. I mean, I'm sure it was an enlightening way to reread that story.
Yes, from every perspective, a crazy, very different look at that. For my personal reading to go from Push to James to Roots, I feel like it's all I've been thinking about for the last 3 weeks.
No kidding.
But very, very cool book. Very, very cool book, and much more digestible than Roots. But what have you been? You've been getting to the theater?
Yeah, a little bit. I was sort of bummed to not go over 4th of July weekend. That's
Oh
usually a
yeah.
pretty big movie going weekend, but I was really not interested in Supergirl or the Minions movie.
Mm.
Any of that stuff was kind of not for me. So I'm catching up on sharing some titles here. I watched. You guys would like this a lot. The Earth, Wind, and Fire documentary on
Ooh,
HBO Max. It was pretty cool. They're a band that I've always really liked and always known. Like 8 or 10 of their songs, sort of.
of
But I
course.
didn't really know anything about the band itself.
Uh huh.
I don't know if your experience is the same, but it was just really interesting, I think, to learn about them and sort of what this aesthetic that they're known for, this bright, colorful, vibrant
Uh
aesthetic,
huh.
what that means, why the band is so huge. Kind of interesting. So if you guys have a second, I would check that out.
Yeah, very cool.
I think we've talked at least amply enough about Disclosure Day. I thought it was like good, not great,
Mm-hmm.
but I always love a Spielberg movie.
Mm-hmm.
I saw The Death of Robin Hood. Have you seen ads for this?
I've not even heard about it.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Sort of flips the script on the Robin Hood narrative. Hugh Jackman plays a late stage Robin Hood. Uh, not not great. Not for everybody.
Huh.
I don't recommend it to you. Probably.
Okay.
I was sort of disappointed. What else do I have here? Oh, and then this will make you laugh just because it's pretty out of character for me. I went and saw with some friends the final Jackass movie, Jackass Best and Last.
I mean, I can only name like 3 movies that are out right now, all because of you,
Yeah.
but that would have been dead last on my list
Yeah.
of what you would go see.
Some friends went to go see it that I guess had grown up watching
Uh huh.
at least the movies, maybe the show too, and invited me along. And I was like, sure, what the hell? I like movies. So I went and yeah, it kind of rocked my world. Not totally sure in a good or bad way,
Uh huh. Uh
but
huh.
they're fun movies. I mean, you really have to turn off the part of your brain that processes ethics and morals and some of those
Indulges in
things.
critical thinking.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun to watch somebody get slungshot across a field in a porta potty every once in a while.
Uh
Kind
huh.
of reminds you to be a kid every once in a while.
That is a heartwarming take on the work of those fine gentlemen.
Well, and you know what? After we went to dinner afterwards and I was talking to them, I was like, you know what, as a concept, it's not a bad documentary series, not because I'm into the stunts or the gross or whatever it is that
Mm-hmm.
they do, but because you're watching the largely same group of people, Knoxville and Steve-O and their friends kind of reacting to the world around them and the way that the world changes. And particularly, there's so much talk about like woke culture and what's politically correct and what's not. And this doesn't concern itself with that
Certainly.
whatsoever. So it's just interesting to sort of see culturally how they evolve and don't evolve over really decades because this
Yeah.
started as an MTV television
Oh
series.
my
So
gosh. So long ago.
yeah. So I actually think as a project, it's at least interesting. Again, maybe it's not really for me, but I don't think it's without like creative merit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
genuinely want to watch it, and I was not allowed to watch those growing up, so it's not like it's just part of my like adolescent core memories or something. I
Right.
just agree with the first point you made. Sometimes you need to step back and laugh at the world if that's
Hmm.
the alternative to crying.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. These days, especially. Yeah. Check them
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
See
yeah.
if they're streaming.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny that you said like no interest in the Minions movie. 10 out of 10 want to see that. I
You know what?
love them.
I actually kind of do too. And this movie is about the Minions through, I guess they're immortal, through Hollywood history. I know this is so stupid.
I guess they're immortal.
I don't know. Through the history of Hollywood. And it's actually like a love letter to movie history. So this is one I do intend to watch when it hits Peacock or whatever.
Okay.
And I will share that when I do.
Okay.
But we have something a little bigger than Minions to talk about, but only really a little.
Insane pivot.
Look, I'm running out of segues here.
No. To be fair, there was no good way to make that transition.
So why don't you take it away and tell us a little bit about Roots?
Yes, I would love to. Okay. First of all, I feel like we always discuss this. 50 years old. I presume we're not worried about spoilers.
Yeah, no.
Wonderful. Great. Okay. Yes, Roots. The Saga of an American Family, published in 1976 by Alex Haley. I actually found a very cool audiobook introduction. He died in the late 90s, so it must have been the 30-year anniversary, probably, or 20-year then. Yeah, massive. It almost, I think maybe because I was always thinking about movies, it didn't cross my mind, but it almost shocked me when we went to approach this title. I was like, wow, how have we not considered that yet?
Right. Yeah.
And that being said, I haven't seen the TV series yet, but I imagine after your discussion today, I probably will.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what your takeaways are.
Yeah. Well, this one's very unique. There is, in a sense, obviously an insane amount to talk about, but also in a sense, in terms of book review or our standard format, what I typically share about plot, not a lot to talk about. And I'll explain that in a second. Okay. So here's the super, super, super fast version. We spend the majority at the beginning, a large percentage of the book, given the other characters, focused on Kunta Kinte. Mm-hmm. He is a Mandinka man living in Western Africa. There's this lengthy exploration of his grandfather coming from Mauritania. You ever heard of Mauritania?
Nope.
I had not either, which blew my mind. Massive country in Western Africa.
Okay.
His grandfather coming and saving the village of Jufre. Do not look at my spelling in the notes. I did it phonetically so that I would remember. That is not how it's spelled. And this is where Kunta Kinte grows up. We have to skip massive swaths of details here because it is a 729-page book.
Yeah, the show reflects that really strongly.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's it. Okay. Put a pin in that one. That's interesting.
Okay.
So we follow 7 generations from this first character we're introduced to. I mean, again, first focal character. Again, we are introduced all the way back to his grandfather, but this is where we start, right? Kunta Kinte.
With Kunta? Okay.
Yes. A lot of time and exposition spent on his growing up, his childhood there in the village, but really the first big event is obviously him being captured and sold into slavery.
Yeah.
And then we continue to follow through the multiple plantations, from him first landing in Annapolis, going to the first plantation where he is enslaved, getting married, having children being sold to other plantations, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, emancipation, all the way through where we end in the 20th century. If I remember correctly, and I'm not certain I am, but I believe it was literally the 120th chapter. It is revealed. Yeah, this thing was massive. We finally find out that this is all Haley's family.
Yeah,
the author.
That's cool.
I was going to say you knew all of this. You watched the show. So they got to that point in the show.
Like, Alex Haley was not a character. There's this like 10 or 15 minute intro to the first episode where they sort of explain what Roots is.
Okay. Interesting.
And they highlight, I mean, Alex Haley's a big deal in the world beyond just literature too. So
yeah.
They make it clear, that this is his family's history.
Okay, very interesting. I actually really appreciate the order that it's given in the book, where you are just starting with this is I don't want it to feel derivative in any way, but it feels like you're starting with a story about a man being forced into slavery, not
Right.
necessarily,
Yeah.
not
Yes,
a
it does. Yeah.
okay, I'm glad.
Yes.
So then to finally come to still part of the narrative, essentially, also here, let's break the fourth wall. First person, I am the author, Alex Haley, and this was the story of my family. Very, very
Mm,
cool.
that's cool.
Fun, because I did not know any of that going into it. I've always known
Oh.
forever this was a book I had to get to. Yeah, but I did not know that before I read it.
Oh, so you figured it was like historical fiction kind of rather than
Yes,
r- nonfiction, I guess.
exactly. And we'll have to get to that a little bit later. I'm not going to make any strong opinions, but we do have to touch on that.
Okay.
But first, who is Haley? Born Alexander Murray Palmer Haley.
Whoa.
Great, yeah, cool name. Tons, massive importance is placed on names throughout the entire story. I don't know if that comes through in the show.
Probably not as much as it does in the book, but there are always names that sort of strike you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and it's not, I mean, each of the individual names is important, but the big, essentially the opening scene is he's being
Oh
born,
yeah.
and the traditional Inju fray is that the father spends 7 days in isolated contemplation
Hmm.
to make sure they're coming up with the correct name for their child.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's in the show too.
Okay. And then the family tradition, this tie that we see coming back over and over each generation through the many children who are born, is the tradition of the father. They choose this name and then go and whisper it into this infant's ear 3 times before anyone else is told, and then
Oh,
relay this family tradition. Yeah, it's very cool.
that's actually really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So Alexander Murray Palmer Haley, born in Ithaca, New York in 1921. Unfortunately, much akin to the story in the book itself, this dude's life is absolutely extraordinary. And I'm going to include what I think were probably the most pertinent highlights to the title we're discussing. But just like the book, we have to skip tons and tons of information.
Okay. I assume he will come up in later episodes.
You got to imagine so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are still, still certainly some big points that we'll touch on, I hope.
Right. Sure.
Essentially attended a couple of universities. Again, for the early 20th century, this is pretty extraordinary. His father was a professor at Alabama A&M that I believe he mentions in the book, because obviously that's the penultimate generation, the book
Oh
ending with
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Attended a couple of historically black colleges, 2 different ones, and then from what I was reading, essentially his father declared he needed more discipline, and at 20 he dropped out of university and joined the US Coast Guard. Did his 20 years required for retirement, and then went on to not start his career as a journalist, but continue it in earnest, I suppose.
Okay.
First for Reader's Digest.
Cool.
We're going so fast here. Skipping straight past the cool stuff he did there.
Yeah.
This led him to doing the first ever, I'm sure we've all heard of, the Playboy interviews.
What do you mean?
Starting in the 60s, like the first started interviewing famous people to publish.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And he did the very first one, which is mind-boggling to me. It was with
Oh,
Miles Davis.
that's pretty wild.
Right. Did interviews. Oh, I should have written it down. There was a second magazine that I guess Hefner also started, and then it folded, but he did interviews for them as well. But oh my gosh, this list. I intended not to touch on them because we just have so much to get to, but let me see if I still have the list of who he interviewed for Playboy up. It's extraordinary. Famously, I believe I read too that they even included this in the show. He interviewed the leader of the American Nazi Party.
That's news to me.
That wasn't in the show?
No. The leader of the American Nazi
Yeah,
Party?
George Lincoln Rockwell.
Maybe it's possible that there were some like television specials created around this because it was such a huge sensation.
Yes, it was the second one. Sorry, it was the sequel, The Roots, The
Oh,
Next Generations.
yeah, I have not got to any of that.
Okay. No, no, no. Well, I mean, that wasn't part of the book. Yeah, he interviewed, yeah. So George Lincoln Rockwell, leader of the American Nazi Party, interviewed him, and Rockwell famously left a gun on the table the
Oh,
entire interview.
yikes. Jeez.
But started with Miles Davis, interviewed Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, it absolutely incredible, right? This career in journalism, extraordinary. The interview actually also ultimately led to him doing this massive series of at least 50 in-person interviews with Malcolm X, leading to him ghostwriting what we now know as the autobiography of Malcolm X,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it a hilarious title. And also, I had no idea because that's a book I read in college and loved, and did not know that makes Roots the second Alex Haley book that I've read.
Yeah. And a book that we've considered covering on this show.
Oh my gosh.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, boy, that'd be a doozy to reread, but it would be enjoyable. Okay, okay. Well, so I do think it's hilarious that makes it the title autobiography of Malcolm X a little
Right.
bit hilarious,
It is
but
silly.
absolutely crazy. So he was doing all of this journalism, all of these interviews before he went on in '76 to write and publish Roots, the culmination of, I believe it was something like 12 years of research he did, going back and forth, going all the way to the village of Jufre
Oh,
in
cool.
West Africa. And then in '76, there are asterisks next to all of these statements, but I'm going to state it as the information was presented by Haley, and then we'll talk about criticisms. Okay.
Okay.
So '76, 200 years after what he believes was to the day, so 1776, that his would have been, so 7 generations, great, 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 great grandfather, Kunta Kinte, landed in Annapolis. And he's been interviewed saying that was the most emotional day of his life. Standing there, he went to the docks where the slave auctions would have been held,
Mm.
and stood there thinking, okay, this is where my ancestor came over.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. Powerful.
There has been, I'm not even sure how to present this information because I don't know how much can or cannot be proven. Essentially, there's been a lot of criticism and doubt of the historical accuracy of his writing since.
Oh my God. That really surprises me.
Yeah, so there are a couple of key factors. One being obviously an area. So Jufre is not actually in, is Kunta Kinte's grandfather in the book comes down from Mauritania and then is captured and sold into slavery in Jufre in the Gambia, way, way western tip of Africa.
Okay.
And so Haley's understanding was that he went there, interviewed all of these people, found a griot. I'm not convinced I'm pronouncing that correctly. Griot, sort of the local individual continuing the oral tradition,
Oh,
right?
cool. Yeah.
Because we're talking 2 centuries now.
Yep.
And confirmed the existence of this individual and their leaving. And the argument is that what happened here was a case of what's called, they termed it circular history or circular storytelling, where essentially it's believed he went down there saying, has anyone heard of my ancestor Kunta Kinte? Enough times that someone else had heard it and it made it into their history and they said, oh yes, Kunta Kinte, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Again, I say it the way that I do because first and foremost, I am not a historian. I'm not here to tell Haley he was wrong.
Right. Sure.
Second of all, I think it's a little bit besides the point.
I think, yeah. In fact, I think it sort of helps what the story was trying to do, which is saying that capturing this epic tale of, you know, Black lineage all the way through countries in Africa that you and I hadn't heard of is Herculean, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. Yep, I agree. That's why as I read these idea and people have gone back and claimed like, because he gives very specific names of the landowners, plantation owners, counties in South Carolina and Tennessee and Virginia where these family members were supposed to be and who they were marrying and who their kids were, and people are arguing these locations and individuals could not possibly line up with the dates being given for the Civil War or the specific battles or anything. And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah, what do you care?
Who cares? Exactly. There was a more important claim that actually did end up bearing out: the writings of a Mr. Harold Corlander, who brought a plagiarism lawsuit and ultimately ended up settling outside of court two years after it's published, so just 1978. And Haley ended up paying him $650,000 for. I mean, they settled out of court, so no one can say for sure or not, but it was pretty regarded that he plagiarized some of the writing. So that's where all of these questions have come from. You put it in such a good. I'm not going to restate it. Yeah,
Sure.
from my perspective as the reader, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'll talk about a little bit more later.
Okay.
When I ask you some questions. But
okay.
The last part I want to talk about, because I thought it was so fun, I could not remember why Kunta sounded so familiar because I did not know anything about the book. The Kendrick Lamar song.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe this will only be funny to me, but I'm going back to look it up because I remembered very specifically one line from it. And I found a cool interview with Kendrick asking him why this name. And he talked about growing up and loving this miniseries, Roots, on
Okay.
TV.
Yeah.
And I guess they go through pretty specifically a scene. So Kinte, after he's brought in, he tries to escape a few times. And then it's either the third or fourth time right away when he's first brought to a plantation. And they just say, okay, you've tried this too many times, and chop one of his feet off.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in the show?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Kendrick talks about, I just remember this show and this, they go all the way to chop the man's foot off, and he still continues and strives and thrives.
Yep.
And so that's where the inspiration for this song that we all love, I hope, came from.
Yeah.
But then there's also a very interesting line where he says, he talks about rappers with ghostwriters. And then it's just because it's stuck in my head so vividly. He says, I could dig rapping, but a rapper with a ghostwriter, what the fuck happened? So funny. The connection on Rap Genius, I don't know if you've used that website. Shout out Jay for showing me that 15 years ago. Awesome website. They're talking about how Kendrick probably did not intend it this way. He's talking about literal rappers in America, contemporary times.
Sure.
But this show that he's referencing was arguably plagiarized from Corlander by Haley, at least parts. No one's argued in full, but at least parts. But then also, Haley was a ghostwriter for Malcolm freaking X.
Right.
I just thought that was so funny and a cool way to bring it full circle. Not particularly part of the book, but so fun to research and learn a little bit more about.
That is cool, especially because Kendrick is, I mean, he's like the only rapper or something to have won a Pulitzer, right?
Yes,
for
correct.
His music.
For
so
To
kind
Pimp
of
a Butterfly.
interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, the ways that I mean, it clearly had an impact on him, maybe even in ways that he didn't block. You know what I mean? If it turned him into that good of a writer that he's winning Pulitzers.
Uh-huh. You don't call it. Do you really say Pulitzer?
That's the first time I've ever said it that way. I think if you roll back the tape, I said Pulitzer 1 second ago.
Yes, you did. In fact, yeah. I was which of course Haley himself also received, not a regular Pulitzer. It had a special name. That's literally what it's called, a special Pulitzer Prize.
Oh, okay.
In 1977. Yeah. I mean, so the connections were just so fun to me.
Yeah.
Truly, absolutely sprinting here. I mean, it's a mammoth book. It is a mammoth undertaking to read. Certainly not what it was to write, but I tried to hit the important parts.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm sure we will revisit him. The Malcolm X movie stars Denzel, and it's known as like one of the best biopics ever made. So I'm sure we'll get to it at some point.
And I have to have read 400 books since I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it still stands out vividly in my mind. That is also an extraordinary piece of writing.
Really interesting. Good. Okay, cool. Is that the book?
Yes. Tried to keep it tight.
Okay, you did a great job. Let's take a quick break, and we will be right back. Welcome back to Adaptation, the Book to Movie podcast. Today we are discussing Alex Haley's Roots, which Chris just gave us a great rundown of. and I'm going to dive into the 1977 miniseries that was adapted from that text. Before I do that, Chris, did you ever have to watch any of this in school?
No, not a sniff. Can I tell you hilariously, the only reference I've actually ever had to it that stuck out enough for me to remember
Yeah.
is, do you remember the episode of That 70s Show?
No.
This show was like brand new and first coming out, and Red and Kitty want to watch it, and he just bought a brand new VCR that can record TV shows onto VHSs.
Yeah.
So he makes her sit and not watch it so that it'll record, and then they'll watch it, and then he
No, watch
forgets
it.
to put the VHS in there.
That
And
sounds
that's
about
all I
right.
ever knew about it.
That's hilarious. I remember learning about this in school when we talked about slavery, which is sort of interesting because I think you could also talk about it in the history of like the 1970s because of how big a deal this show was. And we watched a few clips from it, which I didn't realize were clips from this show until rewatching it for this discussion. And I was like, why have I seen this before? And
Yeah,
then was
yeah.
flashing back to like, I think seventh or eighth grade, and was like, oh, yeah, we watched this in Miss Green's classroom. So
Really?
kind of interesting. Yeah.
Wait, which scenes or which parts?
Specifically, what I remember is the auctioning scene once Kunta Kinte is brought over here and he's auctioned off. And then a scene that stuck out to me, and also actually my parents remembered watching this scene on television as well, when he's whipped for using his name. They try to rename him Toby, I
Uh-huh.
think, right, is the
Uh-huh.
name he's given.
Yep.
And he just insists on being called Kunta. And so he gets punished very severely for it. And
Yep.
that's a scene that I imagine a lot of people will remember because it's visceral and obviously terrible and really stands out. But anyway, this was a tough title to sort of pull my notes and thoughts together for because we are normally a movie podcast and this is our first TV show that we're covering. And the chains of command of television are a little bit different. Who's important in producing a television show is a little bit different than it all is in movies. So you'll have to bear with me here as I probably stumble through some of these explanations, because on top of those differences, it's also changed a lot since the 1970s when this aired. For example, the showrunner of this show was a man named David L. Wolper, Wolper. He was just an executive producer of the show. These days, an executive producer of a television show is not terribly involved. The showrunner instead is usually the head of the writing staff, the person
Oh,
that comes up with the idea, and they're sort of in charge of things.
okay.
There's still a director for a TV show. Sometimes it's a showrunner, sometimes not. But they're sort of beholden to what the showrunner wants, which
Uh-huh.
was, again, different in 1977. So I'm hesitant to even say that this is like David L. Wolper's baby because I just don't know that that's really how it was seen back then. But nowadays, showrunners are people like Tina Fey is a showrunner, Ryan Murphy, Shonda Rhimes, Taylor Sheridan, some of these people that does all the, you guys kind of like some of the Yellowstone and its spinoffs, right? Those all have the same showrunner. That's Taylor Sheridan.
I would have, if you had said all of those names to me, I would have said, oh, yeah, they're the executive producers, right?
They probably also are.
Oh, it's okay, okay. Yep,
But
yep,
again, that's sort of weird because they're like super producers.
right. I
Not
mean, Shonda
not
Rhimes is like not
right. Not many
comparable to the
people
rest of TV at this
elevate to
point.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
So a little bit complicated, which is kind of just to say that I give a lot of credit to the success of this to like Alex Haley, really,
Mm-hmm.
just because it was kind of his story that was adapted, right?
Right.
This was really known as the first super mainstream depiction of the horrors of slavery in America.
Mm-hmm.
Before this, slavery was kind of glossed over or even kind of depicted as like not that bad for slaves. You know, if you think about movies like Gone with the
Mm-hmm.
Wind, The slaves in that movie are, when they are acknowledged, they are not, you know, beaten and raped and whipped and stripped of
Yep.
their names and identities and families and all of the things that make them, you know, human souls. So this was a really big deal because people that, you know, really white people were getting a glimpse at how just fucking awful slaves were treated and how bad slavery really, really was for the first time ever in 1977. That's pretty
Wow.
wild to consider that, like, our parents lived through a generation that kind of learned what slavery was, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's
wild.
crazy.
Aired over 8 consecutive nights in January of 1977. That's not very common for a miniseries to air back to back like that. Usually, you know, if you think about some of the bigger ones that are on HBO, they air once a week, right? And it's usually like Sunday nights, appointment television. This aired on ABC and it was done back to back because ABC got really nervous after seeing how brutal it was. They sort of thought, we've got to just, like, we've invested millions in this, so it needs to hit the airwaves, but they kind of wanted to, I don't know, sweep it under the rug is the right way to put it, but they didn't want it to be an 8-week conversation about how
Uh-huh.
brutal this was. And instead, it
Wow.
turned into like a 50-year conversation about how important
Yeah.
this show is. Massive show in every sense of the words. 8 episodes, like I said, about 10 hours of content. 4 of the episodes are an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes, and would occupy a 2-hour block of television. And then the other 4 episodes are roughly an hour and would occupy an hour block of television. So just a lot to consume. And I'm not even talking about subject material. I'm just saying it's a lot of time
Mhm.
in front of the television and a lot of characters, a lot of time spanned because of the sort of nature of the story. It was just a big pill to swallow. And then on top of that, you add that you're watching some of the worst sides of humanity,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
we're having a pretty serious discussion. But what's really remarkable about this was that in some capacity, it doesn't sound like this number applies to all 8 episodes, but in some capacity, this show was watched by over half of the population of the United States during its initial run. That's
Holy crap.
enormous. Nothing does that. Shows don't do that. Maybe a news broadcast, you know, about something like, I don't know, probably the January 6th newscast had
Mhm.
similar numbers, but even then you're divided between networks, right? This was half of the United States, more than half of the United States, watching the same show at the same time,
Wow.
experiencing the same feelings at the same time. Pretty unbelievable. And it's still the largest ratings ever tallied by Nielsen, which is the sort of preeminent, or I'm sorry, not preeminent, but like most prominent ratings counting system in the nation. I don't know if you've ever heard of a Nielsen family or a Nielsen device. Sometimes they'll snail mail you a device that you'll put on top of your TV so it can kind of track what you're watching.
I've always wondered how that worked.
Yeah, that's pretty much how they, it's evolved a lot since then. I actually just got a call from them the other day because I've filled out surveys for them in the past, and they wanted me to wear a device all day every day that would record what I was listening to so that it could, like, if I was at work and I walked past a TV that was playing Cheers, it would pick that up. And I, of course, was like, yeah, you're not
Yeah,
getting
that's
me to
that's crazy.
wear a
That's a
listening
little out
device
there.
all day long. But they're doing what they can to really try and very accurately measure how many people are watching something. Also has a giant cast. Kunta Kinte as a young kid is played by LeVar Burton, who, of course, you and I know as the host of Reading
Yes.
Rainbow, which I think
Wow.
actually kind of an interesting. I didn't really know he was an actor because I've never seen him in anything besides Reading Rainbow and now this. But I think
Star
it's so.
Trek, right?
Oh yeah, he did have a big career in Star Trek, which I only looked up after realizing that he was an actor. But I think it's kind of cool that he went on to do Reading Rainbow after such a huge adaptation put
Just
him
kept making the
on the
world
map.
better.
Yeah. And then as Kunta got older, he was played by John Amos, who is the star of a sitcom called Good Times. and actually went to CSU, my alma mater, for a little while. So fun
Wow.
connection there. Yeah. And then the supporting cast included a lot of other big names: Luis Gossett Jr., excuse me, Leslie Uggams, Ben Vereen, Ed Asner, Robert Reed, Cicely Tyson, and then some really fun cameos. Maya Angelou has a couple of lines, appears as his
Wow.
grandmother. And then, sort of bizarrely, in a retrospective sense, O.J. Simpson makes a cameo in this. Speaking of news broadcasts that got a lot of attention,
What?
he plays the father of, is it Fanta, the girl that Kunta sort of, I guess, has a crush on for a minute before he
Oh,
gets
in
kidnapped
Jufre?
in Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was a scene. It makes me wonder, if it was like written so that OJ could be in it, because Kunta sort of runs through their lunch, really, where they're hanging out. And this character played by OJ has to chase him down and catch him. And I was like, well, yeah, of course they've hired a football player
Yeah.
to do that, and this, again, 1977, this was long before we knew what we know
Mhm, mhm,
now,
mhm.
but also speaks to how incredibly zeitgeisty it was that they were getting like I mean, the one of the biggest stars in the world that was not an actor to act in this.
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
was an actor, but you know what I mean. The music was mostly written by Gerald Fried, or maybe it's Fried, with some contributions from Quincy Jones, who we've talked about a little bit on this podcast as
Yes.
well.
Who Haley also interviewed.
Oh, really? I'd love to see a Quincy Jones movie.
Oh my gosh, yes.
As long as they did something interesting. I can read his Wikipedia page anytime I want, but I'd be interested to.
As long as it's starring Rashida Jones.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool if she was in it. Or if I think she
Right?
actually directed a documentary about him.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'll have to double check that, but I think that's the case. The show was very well reviewed and is, of course, like I've alluded to many times now regarded as one of the most important television events of all time.
Mhm.
It's been re-edited a few times to condense it from those 8 lengthy episodes into 4 still very lengthy but somewhat less lengthy
Wow.
episodes, and been re-aired a handful of times as I'm sorry, 6 episodes, not 4 episodes. So they've really just trimmed it down just a little bit, and has re-aired a number of times on a number of networks, including BET, and even that re-airing of it set records for BET specifically, viewership. So
Wow.
even its legacy is just incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
At the time, in the 70s, it was nominated for 37 Emmys, which is the most nominations for a miniseries ever, and ended up winning 9 of those, including, of course, Outstanding Limited Series, and got a few prizes for some of the actors, the writing, the directing, editing, music, and sound editing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just Titanic.
Mhm, mhm.
Spawned a number of sequels, as you talked about. Roots, The Next Generation, I believe, covers the last 7 chapters of the book. So that's probably where we get
Okay.
Alex Haley's father, as well as some information about Alex's
Mhm.
career, like you mentioned. There was also a TV movie called Roots the Gift, which was set between episodes 2 and 3, followed young Kunta Kinte and I'm going to forget his name now. The guy that was sort of a mentor that played the violin.
Oh, oh, oh. Oh no.
See, in this, it's like a
There were so
nickname,
many characters.
right? And I knew
Oh
this
my
is one of
gosh.
the things that I think is a flaw, is that it's almost impossible. Fiddler, of course, his name is Fiddler because he
Right.
plays the fiddle.
Yes, yes, yes.
One of the flaws, I think, is that it's almost too much just to remember. And I'm not even talking about the content. I'm just talking about the way the story is structured. I'm like, whose kid? I couldn't even tell you right now what generation this show ends on. I think it's Kunta's great grandkids. I think, but I'm not positive
So,
because
was that Chicken George or is that
I
Kissy.
I believe
No,
it
because
was
Kissy was Kunta's daughter, and then Chick and George was Kissy's daughter.
son. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it was Chicken George's kids, right?
So Tom the blacksmith.
Yeah, yeah. Is that the end?
Oh, interesting.
I think it is.
I mean, that is the lion's share of the book.
Yeah, and that's what I assumed. But like I said, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, getting into criticisms here. But it's very difficult for me to remember who's who, especially post, I guess, post Kizzy in the story,
I mean, Chick
and
and
what
George
happened
has
to
like
who.
10 kids.
Right, right,
Like,
exactly.
you
And
it expands so
the
fast.
last names change sometimes
Yes.
because of marriage, sometimes because these people are sold.
Right, right. They
Sometimes
just
it's
have
not
the last
clear,
name of the, yeah.
right? Because sometimes it's biological and sometimes it's just legal. I don't know. It's complicated. It's a long, complicated story. But I also wanted to mention that there was a sort of spin-off in, I believe, the 90s, a miniseries called Alex Haley's Queen, which follows some of
Yes.
the lineage, I think a very limited amount, but some of the lineage on the other side of his family. I think it's like his maternal grandmother or great
Yes.
grandmother that he's tracking in this extra story. And that was Halle Berry. So I assume that that was also a story
Whoa.
probably about similar to Chicken George, probably about being the child of a slave and
Hmm.
slave master is my
Like
assumption
right,
because
right before emancipation,
yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah, pretty much, I think. And then I do want to mention that the series was remade or readapted in 2016 by the History Channel, and it aired there as well as on the Lifetime and A&E networks here in America, and then later would air across the pond on I think several different networks. I'm just not a television expert, so I don't know the workings quite as well. It's a little confusing to me where, when, and where this exactly aired. This remake was 4 episodes, an hour and a half each. And also, just to keep in line with what the original did, it aired on 4 consecutive nights. Still very respectable in viewership from my understanding, but it was really difficult to track how many people actually watched it because it was split between so many different networks. So I don't have a number like half the population of America, but my understanding is that it was still considered a success, especially because it ended up with 7 Emmy nominations, including
Wow.
Outstanding Limited Series. So, yeah, just really big. It's just kind of crazy the way that it's lasted all this time. I told my
Yep.
parents that we were doing this one, and we talked all night about what they remembered and how they would go to school one day and talk to kids and teachers about what they watched the night before, and then they'd go home and do it again. And my dad's the youngest of 8, and so I asked him, I was like, was this something that everybody that was like living at home at the time sat down and watched? And he was like, yeah, I mean, that's how we did TV at the time. So my dad and all, maybe not all, but a majority of his siblings watched this. My mom's family was much smaller, but I'm sure they all watched it too. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so kind of cool, and it really does hold up. I know I kind of just poked some holes in it a minute ago, but there were several times where I was like, "Damn, this is good!" Like, really started the wave of movie quality television. You know?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which obviously it's a story that deserves that. So that's great.
Did it feel different considering, that we were going to have this discussion as we have so many times, but with just such a sheer quantity of content more?
Yeah, I will tell you, I meant to watch both shows actually, but I severely underestimated how long
Mm,
the first show was. So I was like, well, then I won't watch the remake because I just can't.
yeah.
There's just not enough hours in it.
It was so
Sweet.
much information. This was like 2 Saturdays back to back of me sitting here at home for like 6 hours straight reading, trying
Yeah,
to get through this puppy.
watching it too because I did a handful of episodes. Need to rewatch parts of it, if not all of it, just because my attention span would drift a little bit. And I don't know necessarily if that's the quality so much as it is the quantity of I mean, this is
Mhm.
like essentially it's similar to Game of Thrones. I felt a lot of similarity to Game of Thrones in the incredibly epic nature
Yep.
of the story. And so imagine consuming 6 seasons worth of Game of Thrones in six
Right.
episodes. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I got to remember who Chicken George is now. So I would go back and rewatch, the second half of the first episode about Kizzy and be like, okay, I think I've got it now. I think I can
Yeah.
remember now who Chicken George is.
Trying to like draw the family tree.
Yeah. And in fact, I had to look up a family tree a few times, and it's unbelievable. I mean, yeah, it's a big, big show. So a
Yeah.
little different
Yeah,
to
yeah,
answer
yeah.
your question. But what other discussion questions did you have written down?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, this is kind of exactly what we were talking about. It covers such a vast quantity of time, essentially 2 centuries. We
Mhm.
get into Haley at the very end, but not all the way up to publication. So, I don't know, give or take a little, 1.5 centuries, a
Sure.
lot of time.
Yeah.
And so there is a need at times to make kind of some skips where the beginning is day by day, week by week, month by month of
Mhm.
Kunta's life to having to make some substantial
Oh,
leaps.
yeah.
It's shockingly seamless in the writing, which is just masterful how Haley did that. I imagine they have to have some of these same aspects in the show. Does it feel like that? Were there any parts that felt kind of bifurcated just due
Mm.
to simply having to cover such a timeline?
Yeah. That's funny. That's basically a question that I wrote down for you. It's it works very well with television because basically every patriarch or matriarch of the family that's living or living as far as we know, it's like a 2 episode arc in the show. So
Okay.
it works well that way. Whether it's seamless, I mean, I guess technically it is because you wrap up a story with Kunta as far as we know, and then we switch to Kizzy's
Right.
story, and through Kizzy's story, we're able to find out that there wasn't much more to tell of Kunta's story. For those that are a little bit lost, Kunta Kinte's daughter was named Kizzy. She was sold away to another plantation, I think, when Kunta was probably like in his 40s or 50s.
I think he says he's in his 50s. Yeah, because Belle was older than him. They had stopped having kids, and then they were like wondering if she was going to get together with Noah.
Yeah,
And then they find out that she helped him try to escape. She drew a map for him, so they
yeah,
sold her.
right.
And then we follow her instead. Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, like Chris said, we switch protagonists at that point. And
yeah.
we find out later, actually, it might be when Kizzy's an old woman that she goes and finds her dad's grave and finds out that he didn't live too much longer. And, I mean, the life of a slave is hardly a life. So it's not like he had anything going on that she necessarily missed out on, right? Besides time. So I don't know. I had a lot of issue staying engaged with it
Mm,
after, for sure, after Kizzy's first episode is when I kind of started being like distracted by other things, and then had to find myself going back to get answers to these questions, and who is that guy, and when did that guy come in, and uh, especially with some of the slave masters and some of their, like, I don't even know, neighbors or people that are, I guess, hired help on the farms, plantations. So I don't know if I would say it's seamless, but it does fit in naturally to the television format.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess episodic like that, that makes more sense. Maybe I'm picturing more of a movie style that it would feel a little jolting.
Yeah, and by the way, this was when television would finish and they would go on the next episode of Roots. Kizzy and her son Chicken George get into a fight over whatever, whatever. And
Yeah, yeah, little previews.
yeah, so it, what that does, I think, is sort of pull you out of the story enough to maybe make some of those transitions seem a little bit less jarring. Like I knew that we were going to start following Kizzy, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because that little preview told me, right?
Right. Right.
If I had just gone episode to episode without those little bumpers, I maybe would have been like, whoa, what happened to Kunta?
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So they did a good job of making it work, considering nobody had really done TV like this before, you know?
Uh-huh. Right. Right.
Yeah. Um, I assume that this must, you have alluded to this already, must have been completely overwhelming to read because that's how it was to watch. Do you feel at all inclined to read the novel about his other side of the family?
Interesting. I actually only just found out about that other one in preparing the research for this one.
Mm.
I in the middle of reading this, I probably would have said no. Now, as I'm like thinking back on this, it truly was, and for the sheer quantity of content, it is miraculous how engaging it remained. And I
Yeah.
think I would be very happy to read more of his writing.
Mm.
Yes. It's truly unbelievable that he made 730 pages. There were no parts where I was like, I don't know, should I just like jump to the next chapter or something? You know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And especially now that I can't believe I had never realized he did all the ghostwriting for Autobiography of Malcolm X. I mean, truly masterful writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely read more of his. I mean, fairly limited bibliography. He didn't write a ton of books.
Yeah. It sounds like he knew what he was interested in, you know?
Yeah. Well, and the I again, not disregarding, but more or less ignoring the criticism. Was it fully historically accurate? Was it not? To recreate each of these individual scenes crossing literally hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was brilliant. There was no point that I was like, there's no way. You know, we've talked about with certain fictions, the suspension of disbelief or
Yeah.
suspension of reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, not knowing that this was history. And you know, it's not like he's claiming he thinks everything that he portrayed as taking place
No,
in
of
Joufre
course.
was
Yeah.
right, right. He never
Yeah.
claimed that, but it's so vivid, so direct. And again, as we were discussing of, you know, the history of American slavery and this abhorrent institution that we have inherited the leavings of,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This was such a fresh and unique perspective on that to me. Yes, I would absolutely read anything else he's written.
Yeah. Yeah. I just was curious because I looked up when I realized that this was the first time that slavery had really been sort of honestly depicted. I asked that question because when I learned that that Roots was sort of the first honest depiction of slavery, I looked up other stories, but mainly film and television that sort of qualify and as honest depictions of slavery, and the list is really bare. I mean, it's kind of
Mm.
embarrassing how few depictions there are. And to some degree, I understand that like it's completely unpleasant to watch. It's not like anybody's itching
Yes.
to see more, but as a piece of history, it's one that we certainly need to confront and
Yep.
prevent from happening again. But anyway, I was like, well, maybe these sequels and spin-offs and stuff need to be talked about as much as Roots does. If Alex Haley's the
Mm.
only one that's like creating stuff that's this honest, then maybe those need to be lifted up more. It's like I said, it was Halle Berry, so Oscar-winning movie star in this show, so maybe there were attempts to, but I was just curious, kind of if it overwhelmed to the point of exhaustion, you know?
I definitely would need a break. It could not be the next book that I read.
Yeah.
Now, that's also coming off of reading nearly back
Right.
to back Push and then James and then this.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly writing that I will return to.
Well, your next book is a doozy too, I think. So hopefully that's
Well, yeah, but at least that's one that I've read already, you know?
yeah, and it's less
Doozy
about
in
race.
an entirely different way.
Right, exactly. Not
Because that's
it's not a racial
you
epic.
already yes. You stated this quite eloquently earlier. The fact that this is the sheer quantity that it is and consistently engaging and challenging. You know,
Mhm.
Anna Karenina was longer, but you are
Oh,
not chapter by chapter being faced with the the lived experience of these individuals,
right.
right? There are still pages where people were just kicking it and going to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And that is not really the case here.
No.
You
In
know?
fact, the few moments of joy that are sort of sprinkled throughout this all get punctuated by usually something pretty awful. There's
Oh my
very
gosh.
few moments where I felt like, you know, cheering or felt relief or anything like that watching this.
The disappointment I felt when the fiddler had finally raised all of the money he needed to buy his freedom
Mm,
and then, you know, came back dejected saying, "Oh no, he just told me no."
I
Like,
know.
oh my, and that's just one,
I
right?
know.
That's one of dozens of
I know. I think
hard.
my favorite
Yes.
part in the whole thing was when Kizzy is older and she finally basically, I don't know if this is really the right word. She finally gives in to this other slave that's kind of been pursuing her and trying to flirt with her, and she finally kind of agrees to get to know him better and spend time with him. And it's so rewarding to see her get that after all of these years. But you know, that's a pretty small moment
Yes.
in terms of
In like a lot
the
of
triumphs that
moments.
are, yeah, depicted cinematically throughout history. We're like, really, when the old lady gets a boyfriend, that's the happiest, best part of the whole thing.
I mean, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it really kind of is.
Oof.
What do you have any more questions?
Yes, this one, and as I was writing it, I wasn't sure if we would, you know, end up kind of going over it or not, and we sort of did, but I'll present it anyway.
Okay.
As I told you at the beginning, I did not know it was essentially this autobiographical tale going into it. For me, it was a cool surprise finding out at the end.
Hmm.
It's again, you kind of answered this already. So they covered it at the beginning of the show. That's correct.
Yeah.
Do you think that changed how you viewed the rest of the story, knowing at the outset this is where the information's coming from?
You know what? I think it did a little bit. I don't know that I ever realized that this book was published in the 70s, that it was published
Okay.
so close to my lifespan. I assumed that Alex Haley was much older and that, you know, Kunta Kinte was like his grandfather or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think it did help to recontextualize for me just how insane it was to put some of this stuff, not insane, how bold it was to put some of this stuff on screen and in a book for that matter. And
Yep.
for that to be like the 70s weren't, they were very different than today, but well, less so than you would think.
Oof.
But
Yep.
it's not like this book was published in the 1770s when I don't have any idea what life was like. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
So you can read a book and or watch a show that comes from this time period and sort of not place yourself in it literally. Again, I didn't live during these times that are depicted, but I could understand the lens that it was being told through. I
Mm-hmm.
think a little bit better. And that's not even exactly what I mean to say because of course I don't understand Alex Haley and his family history,
Yes.
you know, as my I do my own, but I mean that it wasn't Shakespeare that wrote this. It wasn't
Right. Right.
Henry David Thoreau that wrote this. It was like somebody whose goal was to make this accessible for modern audiences,
Yes.
whether that was
And
a
you and
reader
I
or a
were both
watcher.
alive within his lifetime.
Right. So yes, I think maybe not as it probably didn't like rock the boat as much for you as it did for you, but it did. I was like, oh my god, that guy! Like, look at his clothes. He was alive, you know, at a time
Yes.
that I could visually recognize. You know,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. So interesting for sure.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
What did you rate this on Goodreads?
This was a very big 4.
Okay.
As is often the case, definitely. Well, I shouldn't say definitely. I am very hard pressed to repeat a book of this length just because of the sheer time commitment.
Yeah,
But I mean, so incredible. I've already said all of the things. But whether it was accurate or not, I don't care. It was absolutely eclipsed by how captivating his writing is. You feel the years of research that he did to cover such a tremendous amount of time in such detail. There are not these big holes, these big gaps. You're not sitting there thinking, wow, this character was a little flat. I mean, truly, truly incredible writing.
that's
The
cool.
biggest of 4s.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I'm
What
in.
about the show?
I'm in pretty much the same boat. I gave it a 4, and I said actually maybe a 4.5. Its
Wow.
biggest flaw is its length, which is also kind of it's like that's the point. That's also kind
Mhm.
of its biggest strength. So it's a
It's
really
called a
interesting.
saga.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if maybe adapting it. I mean, obviously that's the way most people have connected to it is by watching the show, but it makes me wonder if maybe it wasn't really built to be outside of the format of literature just because like I said, I
Mm,
think it's a strength and a weakness
mhm.
simultaneously, but it does some really cool things. One of the things I didn't mention was that some of the casting was super interesting. One of the slave masters was played by the dad from the Brady Bunch, and another one was played by Ed Asner, who is mostly known as a comedian, like a sitcom
Oh, wow.
comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just lost my train of thought. Oh, really interesting because I thought, they're taking these people that we know basically as part of our family and making them like
Uh-huh.
really the villains in the story. And I thought it was just an interesting way to engage the audience mentally and sort of
Yeah.
make them consider themselves as somewhat complicit in
Uh-huh.
what has happened and all of the ways it's unfolded since then.
Wow.
Yeah, and just really cool of those actors too to do that, to understand that. So anyway, there were a lot of little things like that that really elevated it to that 4 or maybe 4.5 status because or despite anything that I thought was a flaw, which
Mhm.
at this point are almost not even worth complaining about. Like I could point to some weird performances or stumbles in the writing, but it's kind of like, I don't. We're how many 50 years later, and that's not the point anymore.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, who would you recommend this to?
Yeah, that was an interesting one for me. I mean, again, books of this length, I would
Right.
find it tough to, tell anyone definitively. I want to tread lightly because I don't intend to dismiss other writing in particular or other ways that we've been given this information. But as we talked about earlier, this is this is probably the new foremost. I mean, not like anyone's coming to me for this recommendation, but in terms of the story, the understanding of the fact that this country was built on the institution of slavery,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a masterful way to understand that from a human perspective. So I think if I was talking to somebody about maybe the historical fiction lens or American history, but not a textbook, I think this is something I would certainly point to.
Yeah.
And the more obvious one immediate to me is if you are that avid reader and you're really into the shifting protagonist, the family lines especially, the two foremost examples of that to me are Pachinko, which I recommend to anybody that I can. Very, very similar vibes. And then not exactly the focus of it, but I'm still going to argue Dune
Okay. Oh,
because part of
yeah.
that family line.
Yeah. Totally. I can see
I
it.
mean, Children of where we start, the movies do such a bastardized, horrific job of showing it, but the books you get much more attached to Paul Atreides,
Sure.
and then or Leto, Duke Atreides,
The dad is
who's
Leto, and Timothy
yes, yeah,
Chalamet
yeah,
is
yeah,
Paul. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, they skip straight past him in the
yeah.
movie, which is crazy. You get that dude to play, and then skip anyway. But that was what drew me into the books of Dune initially.
Was
I
how
thought it
much
was
history you
so
were getting.
cool
Yeah,
going through this family line, and suddenly the protagonist is someone who was just a kid
yeah,
at the beginning, and you didn't know what role they would play. So those are two examples that I would say, if this, then that, and vice versa.
yeah.
I mean, such a cool book. If someone's willing to stick out, maybe I would say, read the first 30 chapters
Oh, and see what.
and see,
Yeah,
rather than suggesting someone I mean, you look at a table of contents that says chapter 120, and I don't care how much you enjoy reading, you stop and consider,
yeah. Totally. Oh,
you know.
totally. I'm curious. Is the part about Kunta? You said that's the lion's share of the book. Is it probably also the best part of the book,
Ooh,
or is that too big
it's
a question?
that's too big a question. The problem to me is the problem and the brilliance in the writing, very, very different focuses. Kunta is the only one that we get such a vivid, and again, truly, we're going nearly day by day initially in his childhood
Mhm.
to months, years, adulthood, many, many actions involving him, and then it kind of necessarily accelerates.
Right. Okay.
But that's because we're focused on more or less just him. We get a lot about his mom Binta and his dad and his siblings, but then as it moves on, it just, obviously, as family trees do, it grows exponentially, and we simply can't get that great a glimpse at each individual.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Obviously, we get a lot more about Kissy, but we're still kind of in the middle of the storyline of him meeting Belle and, deciding what does it look like to become a man here in this country, where I
Yeah.
was so stoked and prepared. Oh, duh. I almost want to say Chicken George is really the peak to me, because that's where we get the internal struggles of what does this life truly look like and mean for us, or what could it.
Yeah.
That I think was also a very unique perspective to me, because again, as you were talking about, it wasn't this whitewashed, nonsensical slavery wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
but also not this unrealistically optimistic struggle, because
Right.
he has paired him alongside Tom Lee. Oh my gosh. No, definitely my favorite part of the storyline, because I think he also touches on what was ahead of his time, in my experience, in the political discourse in this country, of exposing that deliberate wedge on the part of the wealthy and the elite
Mhm.
between black and poor whites,
Yeah.
which I was not prepared for, especially being written 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, that felt like a pretty new concept for me. Again, the disclaimer I always give, perhaps out of my own ignorance, but that was like a new concept for me. I want to say within the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to have been talking about that in the late 70s, if we give that realistic political context, oh boy, I bet you I'm going to be off by a few years, but I mean, this is right around the time that people like Nixon and Reagan and Newt Gingrich were like deliberately doing that here and then.
Yep.
And he's writing this epic
Yeah.
saga about it
Mhm.
historically. Freaking cool.
Yeah.
I have no idea if that was the question you asked. I just had totally forgotten that there were some thoughts that I had stowed away. There was just so much about, I mean, we could do an episode about every 10 chapters
Section.
of the
Yeah.
book. There's so much information. I'm glad they chose to make it a series
Yeah.
and didn't
Instead of a
try
movie.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
I
goodness.
know.
Imagine. Oh,
One of
it'd
the
be horrific.
one of the things that I really loved was some of those nuanced perspectives. Fiddler, specifically as a character, when we
Yes.
meet him, for a minute, you're sort of like, what is this guy's deal? Because he's like
Yes.
telling Kunta basically to fall in line and like kiss the slave master's ass and all this stuff. And then you realize that it's because he's built basically as nice a life as he can for himself by doing those
Yep.
things. And by the way, it's still not a nice life. I don't mean anything by
No, I
that.
think you said it
But
appropriately.
I just thought, the actor that plays it, Louis Gossett Jr. I was like, how did they get this guy? He's like hugely representational in black cinema. I couldn't believe he was playing this character that was like a total pushover. And then I was like, he's not a pushover.
He's not.
He's the
He's
smartest guy
doing
in the
what he yep.
book.
But you're presented with both parts so vividly.
Yeah.
First, you get Kunta's perspective. That's like, I think he literally says it. He's like, why are these they're acting like they like being here?
Mhm.
And you are not just confronted, you are smacked in the face with an entire Hoover Dam worth of cement, with
Yeah.
the duality of the situation.
Yeah.
From his perspective, that's right. And from his perspective, that's right. And from her perspective, that's right.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Right. And like Chicken George,
Yep.
His whole story was so complex, being close with his father, who is, of course, also his owner.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the way that's manipulated, I just thought it was so
Oh my gosh.
nuanced.
And then the part where
Yeah.
he's like finally earning some money and trying to make his own way, and they're talking about seriously buying their family. And then this horrific human who
Mhm.
raped his mother comes up and mentions, well, that's weird. You haven't named any of your sons after me yet. I mean, it's
And his name is Chicken
obvious.
George, by the way. Like, that's what they call him. I mean, like, seriously, to say that to somebody named that. And I mean, his birth name is George, but he's
Who
called
is
Chicken
your
George.
biological son that you've not acknowledged his
Yeah.
entire life?
Unbelievable.
Like, yep. Yeah. And again, storyline of, I don't know what, 30 family members that we meet in greater and lesser degrees of intimate. Just extraordinary. Just absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yes. It is tough, but it's worth it, I think,
Yes.
as a read and a watch. And my recommendation, by the way, is very similar to yours. I think the main thing that you need to have is an interest in history and how and why it unfolds. And you can sort of watch through that lens, right? This is the story of America for the most part.
I mean, it's all of it. Yeah, you get, yes, that. I'm sorry, I don't need to interrupt you.
No,
I agree with you. A lens of literally all of America's history.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as long as you can get on board with that, I think you would enjoy the show. If you're not into that, it can get a bit weighty for sure. But I mean, it's the same as like, I mean, I compared it to Game of Thrones for a reason. We've got 3 Game of Thrones shows now, and all of them we have to remember who's related to who. And
yeah,
but Shogun too is sort of in this vein. Pachinko, I think, is a great example that you mentioned. Yeah, these historical epics that span decades and decades and decades are really the best comp. I mean, like, this is about slavery, but it's about so much more than that, right?
Yep.
Interesting. Well, thank you for joining our conversation on Roots. We've very much enjoyed this conversation. And speaking of historical epics, our next title that we'll be covering is the Odyssey, as well as Christopher Nolan's adaptation. And I assume we'll end up talking about the Coen brothers, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, as well.
You got to imagine so.
Okay, thanks for joining us.